Hi Vogue, I'm Priscilla Presley and this is my life in looks. This is an important day. Yes, this was the day that Elvis was going back to the United States. He had just finished his duties in Germany.
At 80, in a moment that feels both intimate and long overdue, Priscilla Presley finally gives voice to a truth that has quietly defined her life for decades. He was the love of my life. The words are simple, yet they carry the weight of an entire lifetime of passion, sacrifice, fame, and loss, intertwined with the legacy of Elvis Presley, a man whose presence shaped not only music history but her very identity. For years, the world has speculated about the nature of a bond, reducing it to headlines and public appearances. But behind...
Oh my gosh, I think, living the life with Elvis Presley, and of course, I was his wife, and I, learned a lot from him about life, about business.
Behind the glamour and myth was a deeply personal story, one that only now, with the clarity of time, she is willing to fully share. She recalls their first meeting with a sense of vivid immediacy, as though the years have done little to dull its impact. It was not just the encounter with a rising star, but the beginning of a connection that would alter the course of her life forever. In those early moments, there was a sense of wonder, of stepping into a world that felt larger than life, where love and fame became inseparable forces. Yet even then, beneath the excitement, there were complex...
I tried to turn my back to that, but I just didn't want to share him. Simple as that.
Complexities, differences in age, in experience, in the realities of the life they were entering together. These were not obstacles she fully understood at the time, but they would come to define much of what followed. As she reflects, her words reveal a love that was both extraordinary and deeply complicated. Being with Elvis Presley meant living in the center of a storm of attention, where privacy was rare and expectations were immense. She describes the early years as a whirlwind, filled with moments of genuine connection, laughter, and affection, but also shaped by the pressures of a life lived in the public eye. Elvis was not just a partner. He was a phenomenon, a figure whose identity extended far beyond the personal, making it difficult to separate the man she loved from the icon the world demanded. There is a quiet honesty in the way she speaks about the challenges they faced. Love, she explains, is not always enough to overcome the forces that surround it. The demands of fame, the isolation it can create, and the personal struggles that often remain hidden from the public all played a role in shaping their relationship. She does not speak with bitterness, but with a sense of understanding, an acknowledgement that their story was never simple, and that its complexities were part of what made it so profound. Their eventual separation is a moment she revisits with a mixture of reflection and acceptance. It was not, she insists, the end of their connection, but a transformation of it. Even as their lives moved in different directions, the bond they shared remained intact, evolving into something that could not be defined by traditional terms. She describes it as a connection that transcended time and circumstance, one that continued to influence her long after their relationship changed. It is this enduring quality that gives her statement its depth, that even after everything, she still considers him the love of her life. As the years passed and the world continued to celebrate the legend of Elvis Presley, she found herself navigating a different kind of challenge, preserving his legacy while also preserving her own identity. It was a delicate balance, one that required both strength and resilience. She became not just a keeper of memories, but a guardian of a cultural icon, ensuring that his story would continue to be told with authenticity and respect. In doing so, she carried a part of him with her, not just as a memory, but as a living influence on her life. Her confession at 80 is not just a revelation. It is a culmination. It is a result of years of reflection, of understanding the difference between public perception and private truth. The world may have seen their relationship in fragments, through photographs and headlines, but she lived it in its entirety, with all its beauty and all its challenges. Her words now offer a rare glimpse into that reality, one that is far more nuanced and deeply human than the myth that has surrounded them for so long. She speaks of love not as something perfect or unchanging, but as something that evolves, that leaves an imprint regardless of how circumstances unfold. Her story becomes a testament to that idea, that the most significant connections in our lives are not always the ones that last in a conventional sense, but the ones that shape who we are. In this way, her relationship with Elvis becomes more than a chapter in her life. It becomes a foundation of her understanding of love itself. In the end, her words linger with a quiet power. "He was the love of my life" is not a statement of nostalgia or regret, but a truth that has remained constant despite the passage of time, despite the changes in their lives, and despite the world's attempt to define their story. It is a reminder that love, in its deepest form, is not diminished by distance or altered by circumstance. It endures, it evolves, and it remains a part of us, shaping our lives in ways that can never be fully explained. And so, as Priscilla Presley looks back on her life at 80, what emerges is not just a story of fame or loss, but a story of connection, of a love that, despite everything, remains a defining force of her journey today as the years continue to unfold. The reflections of Priscilla Presley grew even more introspective, shaped by the passage of time and the quiet understanding that only comes with it. At 80, her voice carries a depth that goes beyond memory. It carries meaning. When she speaks of Elvis Presley now, it is not with the urgency of youth or the emotion of recent loss, but with a calm, almost poetic clarity. The love she describes is no longer tied to a specific moment or phase of life. It has become something enduring, something that exists beyond time itself. She reflects on the contradictions that define their relationship, the way love and distance often coexisted, how closeness could sometimes feel overshadowed by the demands placed upon them. Being with Elvis meant sharing him with the world, a reality that few could truly understand. His life was never entirely his own, and by extension, neither was theirs as a couple. The crowds, the expectations, the constant attention, they all became part of the fabric of their relationship, shaping it in ways that were both beautiful and challenging. Yet through it all, she insists, there was always something real, something undeniable that kept them connected even when circumstances pulled them apart. There is a quiet vulnerability in the way she speaks about identity, how difficult it was, at times, to find her own sense of self while being so closely associated with someone who existed on such a monumental scale. For years, she was seen primarily in relation to him, her own story often overshadowed by his legend. But as time passed, she began to carve out her own path, to define herself not just as someone who loved Elvis, but as someone with her own voice, her own purpose, and her own legacy. This journey of self-discovery, she suggests, was just as important as any chapter of their relationship. Yet even as she built her own identity, the connection to Elvis Presley never faded. It remained a constant presence, a thread that ran through every stage of her life. She describes it not as something she held on to, but as something that simply existed, a part of her that could not be separated or forgotten. It was not about living in the past, but about acknowledging the role that love played in shaping her present. Her reflections also carry a sense of acceptance, a recognition that their story was never meant to follow a conventional path. The separation that once seemed like an ending now appears, in hindsight, as a necessary evolution. It allowed both of them to grow, to navigate their own journeys, and to understand their connection in a different way. She does not frame it as a loss, but as a transformation, one that preserved the essence of what they shared while allowing it to take on a new form. There is also a deep awareness of the way their story has been told and retold over the years. She acknowledges the fascination, the speculation, the countless interpretations that have attempted to define their relationship, but she gently pushes back against those narratives, reminding us that no one outside of a relationship can fully understand its truth. What the world saw was only a fragment, a glimpse into something far more complex and deeply personal. Her words now serve as a way of reclaiming that narrative, of offering a perspective that is grounded not in myth, but in lived experience. As she continues to speak, the tone becomes almost reflective of something larger than just her own story. It becomes a meditation on love itself, on its ability to endure, to adapt, and to leave a lasting imprint on our lives. She suggests that true love is not defined by permanence or proximity, but by its impact, by the way it shapes who we are and how we see the world. In this sense, her connection with Elvis transcends the boundaries of time and circumstance, becoming something that exists beyond the limitations of any single moment. I end these later reflections. There is a sense of peace that was not always present in earlier chapters of her life. The questions that once lingered have softened, replaced by an understanding that not everything needs to be resolved or explained. Some connections, she implies, are simply meant to be felt rather than fully understood. And it is within that space of acceptance that her words carry their greatest weight. And so, as Priscilla Presley continues to share her truth, what emerges is not just a story of a relationship, but a story of growth, resilience, and the enduring nature of love. Her confession, "He was the love of my life" is no longer just a statement about the past. It is a reflection of a lifetime, a quiet acknowledgement of a bond that, despite everything, remains unbroken in the ways that matter most. And as the years stretch further into reflection, the voice of Priscilla Presley takes on an even deeper resonance, one shaped not just by memory, but by the quiet weight of everything she has come to understand. At 80, her confession is no longer simply a statement of love. It becomes a window into a life lived in the shadow of something extraordinary, and the strength it took to both embrace and survive it. When she speaks of Elvis Presley now, it is with a calm certainty that feels almost timeless, as though the passage of decades has distilled her emotions into something pure, something unshaken by the noise that once surrounded them. She remembers not only the moments the world saw, the public appearances, the dazzling performances, the image of perfection carefully curated for fans, but also the quiet, unguarded moments that existed behind closed doors. It is in these memories that her story takes on a different tone, one that reveals the human side of a man often viewed as larger than life. She speaks of laughter, of vulnerability, of conversations that had nothing to do with fame or expectation, moments where he was not a legend, but simply a person searching for peace in a world that rarely allowed him to have it. These memories, she suggests, are the ones that matter most, the ones that define her understanding of who he truly was beyond the myth. Yet alongside those memories is an acknowledgement of the loneliness that often accompanied such a life. Being connected to someone like Elvis meant existing in a space where reality and illusion constantly overlapped. The world saw glamour and success, but behind that image were pressures that few could fully comprehend. She describes a sense of isolation, of being surrounded by people yet feeling alone, of navigating a relationship that was as much shaped by external forces as it was by their own emotions. It is this duality of closeness and distance, of love and challenge, that gives the story its depth and complexity. There is also profound honesty in the way she addresses the sacrifices that came with that love. She does not romanticize the past or attempt to smooth over its difficulties. Instead, she speaks openly about the compromises, the moments of doubt, and the emotional toll of being part of something so intense and all-consuming. Love, in her experience, was not always easy or straightforward. It required patience, understanding, and at times, the willingness to let go of certain expectations. And yet, despite all of this, she makes it clear that she would not change it, that the connection they shared was worth every challenge it brought today as she reflects on their separation. Her perspective reveals a depth of acceptance that can only come with time. What once may have felt like a painful ending now appears as a necessary turning point, a moment that allowed both of them to grow in ways they could not have within the confines of their relationship. She speaks of it not with regret, but with a sense of understanding, that sometimes love does not end because it fades, but because it needs to transform in order to survive. In this light, their separation becomes not a failure, but an evolution, a shift from one form of connection to another. Her words also touch on the enduring presence of Elvis in her life, not as a memory confined to the past, but as a constant influence that continues to shape her perspective. She describes it as something almost intangible, a feeling rather than a thought, a presence that exists in the spaces between moments. It is not something she actively holds onto, but something that simply remains, woven into the fabric of who she is. This idea that love can persist beyond physical presence, beyond time itself, is at the heart of her confession, giving it a depth that resonates far beyond her personal story. There is a quiet strength in the way she has carried that love through the years, balancing it with a life she has built for herself. She speaks of finding her own identity, of stepping out from the shadow of a legend and discovering who she is as an individual. It was not an easy journey, she admits, but it was a necessary one. And in doing so, she found a way to honor both her connection to Elvis and her own sense of self, creating a life that reflects both her past and her present. As the narrative continues to unfold, her story becomes something larger than a single relationship. It becomes a reflection on the nature of love itself, on how it shapes us, challenges us, and ultimately defines us in ways we may not fully understand until much later in life. She suggests that the most meaningful connections are not always the ones that last in a conventional sense, but the ones that leave a lasting imprint, that continue to influence who we are long after circumstances have changed. In these extended reflections, there is a sense of quiet closure, not in the sense that everything has been resolved, but in the understanding that some things do not need to be. The questions, the complexities, the contradictions, they are all part of the story, and they do not diminish its significance. Instead, they add to it, creating a narrative that is as real as it is profound. And so, when Priscilla Presley says, "He was the love of my life," it is no longer just a statement. It is a culmination. It is a result of decades of reflection, of living with both the beauty and the challenges of that love, and of coming to understand its true meaning. It is a quiet, powerful acknowledgement that some connections transcend time, that they exist not just in memory, but in the very essence of who we are in the end. Her story lingers not as a tale of fame or even of loss, but as a testament to the enduring power of love, complex, imperfect, and unforgettable today as Priscilla Presley continues to share her reflections. There is an unmistakable sense of wisdom that comes from a lifetime spent navigating love, loss, and the extraordinary pressures of public life. At 80, she speaks not as someone defending a legacy, but as someone offering insight into the human heart. The love she shares for Elvis Presley is no longer confined to the romantic or the immediate. It has matured into a reverence for the man he was, the life they shared, and the enduring influence he has had on her journey. She recalls the way he made her feel alive, even amidst chaos, the way his presence could transform a simple moment into something extraordinary. It was not always easy, she admits. The demands of his fame, the constant scrutiny, and the pressures of expectation often made their love complicated. But within that complexity was a depth of connection that could not be replicated or replaced. It was a love that taught her resilience, patience, and the delicate art of balancing devotion with self-preservation. Her words take on a reflective quality when she discusses the heartbreaks and misunderstandings that inevitably came with their relationship. She does not shy away from the difficulties, acknowledging that their love was tested in countless ways. Yet even those challenges, she insists, did not diminish the significance of what they shared. Instead, they became part of the fabric of their story, shaping the strength of their bond and giving her a profound understanding of what it truly means to love someone. There is also an acknowledgement of the life she built after their separation, a life in which she learned to define herself on her own terms. She pursued her passions, cultivated her independence, and became a force in her own right. Yet even as she created a new chapter for herself, she never let go of the love she had experienced. It was not a tether to the past, but a guiding presence that informed her decisions, her values, and her understanding of what it means to truly connect with another person. Her story also reveals the challenges of maintaining love in the public eye. The scrutiny, the speculation, and the relentless attention of the world could have easily overshadowed the intimacy of their relationship. Yet she managed to preserve something private, something sacred, even when so much of their lives was public property. It is a testament to her strength, her discernment, and her understanding that love does not need to be validated by others to be real today. As she continues, she reflects on the enduring nature of memory, the way certain moments remain vivid, untouched by time, while others fade into the background. For her, the love she shared with Elvis is etched permanently in her memory, a series of images, feelings, and experiences that continue to resonate decades later. It is a love that does not rely on proximity, on daily contact, or even on the conventional markers of a relationship. It exists as a quiet, enduring force, shaping a perspective and influencing her life in ways both subtle and profound. There is a philosophical quality to her reflections at this stage of life. She speaks of love as something that evolves, something that cannot be fully controlled or predicted. The connection she had with Elvis was unique, shaped by circumstances few could understand, and yet it became a defining element of who she is. It is a love that, she suggests, exists not only in shared moments, but also in the growth, understanding, and wisdom that comes from having experienced it. She also emphasizes the importance of authenticity in love, the idea that true connection requires honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to be fully seen. Her experiences with Elvis, both joyous and challenging, reinforce this truth. Love, in its most powerful form, is not superficial performative. It is real, messy, and transformative. And it is this realization that allows her to speak of him with such enduring admiration and affection, even in recounting the more painful moments. There is no trace of bitterness. She conveys a profound acceptance that life, love, and legacy are not always neat or fair, but they are meaningful nonetheless. The challenges she faced, the losses she endured, and the complexities of her relationship with Elvis all contributed to a depth of character and understanding that she now carries with quiet dignity that in the end, her confession, "He was the love of my life," becomes more than a statement of personal history. It is a reflection on the nature of love itself. enduring, transformative, and unbound by time or circumstance. It is a testament to the idea that true connection leaves an indelible mark in our lives, shaping who we are and how we see the world. And for Priscilla Presley,